Welcome to LB's The Lover of Books Author Chat. If this is your first time here live or watching a recording, I'm so glad you found us and welcome. I've had the honor to interview over 60 authors now, and just everybody out there has helped that YouTube channel grow. It's over 16,000 hours watched now. So thank y'all so much. These authors are fantastic and they give their time and their inner thoughts. So we are just so happy to have them on. And I'm really appreciative that we have Attica here tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce this triple threat. And yes, she is a triple threat. She's a New York Times bestselling author of 6 novels, including the Edgar Award-winning Highway 59 trilogy that we're here to talk to tonight. But good news, third installment is already out by Guide Me Home and is ready to read. So yes, Ann Patchett, you don't have to wait anymore. She's also the author of Pleasantville, winner of the Harper Lee Prize for Legal Fiction, and longlisted for the Bailey's Prize for Women's Fiction. The Cutting Season, winner of the Ernest Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. Her debut, Blackwater Rising, was nominated for an Edgar Award and the NAACP Image Award, as well as Los Angeles Times Book Prize. She's been also shortlisted for the Women's Prize Fiction. All right, that's our first. But she is also not only writing novels, she is a former fellow at the Sundance Institute Features Filmmakers Lab. She's a screenwriter and a TV producer, triple threat, with credits that include Empire, When They See Us, and Emmy-nominated Little Fires Everywhere. I hope y'all have all read that book and watched it, for which she won an NAACP Image Award for television writing. She co-created and executive produced an adaptation of her sister Tembi Locke's memoir From Scratch for Netflix. Fantastic memoir, fantastic show. Again, go find those as well. She's currently in a multi-year development deal with Universal Television, working on an adaptation of her Highway 59 series, among other shows. She is a native Houston Texan, which I'm so excited. I'm hoping my accent comes out even more tonight. But she lives in Los Angeles, California with her husband and daughter. Welcome, Attica. So glad you're here with us.
I'm happy to be here. And I brought my mom.
Oh, where's mom? Can you go ahead? Let's see if she'll, I'm going to find her. Did she sneak off? She still has her camera on. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and highlight her. Go ahead and say hi. Oh,
Mommy, you're
muted. Can you unmute for me?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry about that. Happy to be here with you guys.
Well, first of all, I told you earlier, but she just celebrated a birthday a couple weeks ago. So we want to wish you happy birthday.
Thank you again.
Attica, tell us why you wanted to invite your mom tonight.
Because she's the best. And for a very long time, my mom would be the first person to read a draft of anything. I mean, some of my earliest writings, she was the first person to read everything. And she's always just been a great cheerleader. And then about this book series in particular, you know, so everybody in my family, both on my mom's side and my dad's side, comes from rural towns along Highway 59 in East Texas. So a lot of my deep love for rural East Texas comes from my mom. And it comes from my mom's mom and, her mom's side, her dad's side. The love of the blues kind of comes from my mom. So she just seemed like the perfect fit to join this conversation.
Are you actually in East Texas right now?
Actually, I live in Houston.
You live in Houston now? Okay.
Houston.
So my son's there right now at school. So he's, y'all had a little bit of crazy weather with some snow recently, which is unheard of.
Yeah, really. We had not had that much snow. I've been here for, 40 years? No, more than that, actually, and never have seen that much snow.
Yeah, it was exciting stuff, I'll tell you that. Well,
it's beautiful, actually.
Yeah, the pictures were gorgeous. Well, I want to thank you for coming, and anything you want to say to Attica while we have her on. Sure, her eyes got big.
I am just so happy that she invited me. Of course, I'm a big fan, and I would be a big fan anyway, just because I'm her mom. And so that's bottom line. But I really admire her work ethic. I admire her passion for the work that she does. And I also admire the fact that it's novels, it's mystery, it's fiction, but it's rooted in experience that, our family has lived. And there's also, I think, a really important social message in all of it. And I appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
Mama.
I will say that was adorable. Loved it. And you're the best. And yes, thank you for being her first reader all those times and cheerleading her along the way, because I know you're a big part of getting her to where she is today and for getting Highway 59 in our hands. So wanted to say thank you. And I'm going to go straight into asking questions here. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat box to ask her too. So feel free.
Thank you.
All right. Now let's go ahead and just jump straight into this book. Okay. He is just allure. Texas Rangers in of itself has this aura in Texas. It's a thing, and it does have this reverence that you talk about. So why did you want to take this on, and how did you kind of get inside this world? Because they are sort of, I don't know, other earth worldly. I don't know how to say it.
Yes, and it was kind of an accident. What came to me first about this book series was the location, which was Highway 59. I had this idea that I wanted to do a book series where every book was another town along this highway, and there'd be like a new crime every book. It was my agent who was like, okay, well, great, but part of the trope of the genre is we're following somebody. So who are we following? And I hadn't even thought of that. So then I just started thinking, who would we follow? And then, because the thing about Highway 59, which goes from Laredo up to Texarkana, what kind of a character goes all over the place? Like, I'm thinking, is it a PI? Is it a lawyer? Is it a cop? I don't know. And then it just hit me, the Rangers. I mean, they literally range. I mean, what's so interesting about what they do is they're assigned by region, and they have a ton of freedom. And there's an East Texas region. I think it's called Company A. And that's where they go. So then I had to teach myself about the Rangers, and I didn't know anything about them. And you are correct. I've only actually seen them in the wild in like one time, and I was like, what the, because it's the hat. It's the whole thing. It's the hat. It's the star it's like somebody walked out of a movie.
Yeah.
So I had to teach myself about the Rangers. I found one gentleman who was very sweet. His name was Kip Westmoreland, who gave me some of his time and I very shocked answered just some questions about what they do. And then I did a lot of research about what you get up and do what if you're a Ranger. You go to the precinct office, whatever, and do what. And that gave me a lot of plot, actually, because that's how I learned that they had been doing a lot of investigating about trying to take down the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. I learned about that just through the research. So that was it. And then I tried to be honest about the Rangers too, because they have a storied history, and there are parts of that history that are kind of ugly as well. There are things that they did in the past that are not to be celebrated in terms of pushing out Native Americans, violence against Mexican Americans. Like, none of that stuff is good. And by writing a Ranger of color, he was somebody I could write that could hold the complexity of the best that the Rangers could be, while also acknowledging some of the uglier sides, which I think in a way is what I'm doing about Texas.
Yeah.
That my love for the state of Texas is enduring, even in the face of some things I find to be ugly about it in present day. But that's, one of the things about life is learning how to hold contradictions and learning how to live with that and accept that, and be honest about that.
Complexity, I think, is the perfect word, not only for this book, but also for your main character. He is not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. He is as real as they come. How did you go about developing him, and why did you choose the traits that you did for Darren?
Well, I will admit the hard drinking detective is a bit of a trope, and it works. I mean, it works. I tend to sometimes, when I create characters, start just throwing stuff and just adding stuff, adding stuff. What if he didn't know his mom that well? What if she was a drunk? What if he was a drunk? What if the uncle that he looked up to the most died? What if he went to law school? Like, you just start layering in things that make it really complicated, and that's kind of my approach. I thought I definitely wanted to write about his kind of disenchantment, because I think in a lot of ways I was channeling my own disenchantment with Texas. How do I love this place that doesn't always love me back, or that disappoints me considerably? But how do I make space for the depth of my affection for it still? And how do I highlight the parts of it that are the best, that the things about Texas that I love? The people are incredibly friendly. There's a kind of stick-to-itiveness about everything. There's a kind of front porch philosophizing about stuff. There's a great sense of humor. There's a down-to-earthness. There's all these great values that I learned because my ancestors are Texans. And I just wanted to highlight that and create a character who is trying to hold that up and hold up those virtues, while also acknowledging he wears the badge, that people wore 100 years ago that were doing bad stuff. And so how do I be, how can I be the best that I can be? And then also the thing with Darren is, which really is at the heart of him, is his moral compass and the moral relativity, and the part of him that's like, I want to do what I think is right, and that's not always what the state of Texas says is right. But if I start bending the law, how am I any better than people who bent the law in a way that I disagree with? Like, where's the line?
Yeah.
So that was the kind of impetus for all of it.
And I love all that gray area because it does make you think about it. But I want to just ask this personal question of you. You're in California talking to
Mhm.
someone and they say, "Hey, well, where are you from?" Or what do you say? Like, where do you
Texas.
live? I do too. Like, or where do you live? I will say, I live in Greensboro, but I'm from Texas. Like, I always feel like I have
Yes.
that hold on me,
Yes.
regardless. Is that sort of it sounds like that's what you experienced as well.
I feel the same way. I sometimes refer to myself as a Texan in exile. Um, it is so to the core of my being that you can't quite fully know me without knowing that I was raised in Texas.
Mhm.
So I always kind of include that in any kind of way that I'm talking about myself, because it's not only is it a foundational part of who I am, it's a foundational part of my life's work, in that I want Texas to have a literature. I want Black Texas to have literature. I want to write something that says, hey, I love this place, even though, and
Yeah.
I know it to be, I know what its best self looks like.
And so you have these characters grappling with this constantly. And he even and I will say, just so we get this cleared out, everybody here has read the book. If not, they're okay with spoilers, but only
Okay, okay,
but only book one, because that
okay,
was the intention, was to get everybody reading book one to read book two to read book three. So we don't want to spoil anything beyond. But for this, he even ends the book with that mentality, like, oh gosh, did I just do the same thing that I'm accusing them of? It's sort of that complete, you know, round circle.
and I think you can look at that in terms of law enforcement. You can look at that in terms of politics, but I think in all of our lives, there's this sense of like, it's what Michelle Obama was saying, which is, when they go low, we go high.
Mhm.
But do we always go high? Like, sometimes you
And
want to
how
be
high
like,
do we go?
yeah, I mean, sometimes you want to get in the muck and kind of fight like they're fighting. But like, it's a really tricky thing to figure out your own moral compass, and to decide for yourself, um, what is the right way to combat a wrong. And I'm saying a wrong in a big political sense. I'm also saying, somebody at your church was gossiping and said something nasty. Do you then gossip and say something nasty about them, or do you take the higher road? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. And I think it gets extra complicated if you are wearing the badge of a group of people. If you are now a part of authority, you're part of the establishment, and that Black and brown people in Texas kind of gotten their asses kicked for hundreds of years. Is it okay to start playing fast and loose to fix that,
Right.
or to level it out? Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I'm a person who tends to write the question. I tend to just write the question. And I try to not moralize about Darren. I think Darren is very conflicted, but I try to write what I think is honest. Like, I don't know that anything that Darren does is right, but I think it's honest. And that's the best I can do and let everybody else reflect on it as well.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's a preachy or a this is the right way to handle it, because he's grappling with it the entire time as well, which makes us even more invested in him as a character. So much of this book is about race, and you brought up Michelle Obama, and there was a comment that you made. It said how America told on itself with Obama in the White House. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that sort of set the stage for this book in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
Yeah, the line is that in the wake of Obama, after he was gone, suddenly America told on itself, and it told everybody who it really was. And it's always been that. I will admit that I was one of the people for whom I really believed that the Obama administration was opening a door to something new. Part of what was so painful about the Trump administration is that basically over the course of my lifetime, and so my mom is here. My mom was a civil rights activist. My dad was a civil rights activist. Their parents did all kinds of things to build colored schools and to become the first this and the first that. And I always kind of had this idea of life that we were the arc of the moral universe was bending towards justice. And basically, as a human being that's born post civil rights, that's kind of what it looked like. Now, is everybody, what was the battle bloody? Was it perfect? No, but you had a sense of ascent that we were kind of going in the right direction. I will never forget that my daughter, who's now 18, when she was about 5, somebody at school said something to her. They were like, well, I heard brown people drink out of the toilet. And she said, Mommy, is that true? And I went, oh, okay. And I said, Clara, I remember exactly where we were. We were in the grocery store. And I said, when we get in the car, let's talk. And in the car, she's 5. And I said, do you want me to talk to you about race in America? And she said, okay. And I started with this. Here's the thing. As human beings, we are constantly getting better. We're constantly getting better. And I framed everything like that before I went back to, now let me tell you about slavery. Now let me tell you about rounding people up. But because you could frame it like we are getting better, then you could tell her the ugly stuff. So I had been walking through life believing that we were on the right path. Trump's election broke my brain. It was such a snap back. It was such a reaction to, and it was just extraordinarily painful. It's just extraordinarily painful to think that so many people don't care about the things that he says. I mean that at the level of, if you are a woman who's ever been assaulted, if you are somebody who's LGBTQ, if you are an immigrant, if you are Black, like just the ugly things that he said, it really hurt, like really hurt. And I also felt stupid. I also felt like, because I did not believe this man was going to be elected, in 2016. I did not. So I felt dumb. I felt ashamed about being dumb. I felt ashamed that I thought Obama just kind of fixed everything. And I definitely was not a person who thought like post-racial America. I don't think that's a goal, but I really, really believed that a tide was turning, and then it snapped back hard, and it just hurt. And but the thing about this book though, I wrote this book before he was elected. It was already done when he was elected. It was already like in copy. It was done. So I looked like this really prescient person, but I was writing my worst nightmare, and then it came true.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, I mean, it says race has always been an issue, and racism, like that brotherhood, has always been in those back corners of East Texas and so many other places across the United States. But it almost seems like through that administration, it was okay to say, yeah, I am. And that's all right if I am racist, and that's justified. And it just blew me away. I totally agree with this. But you take it, there's really not that much politics actually in this book. I mean, yes, on a grander scale, but you're not talking specifically about Republicans or Democrats. I grew up in a very Democratic bubble with the unions down in Southeast Texas, or used to be a bubble down there. so I grew up, Ann Richards, like everything, but it's just, seeing these small towns and knowing, like what Geneva says, he doesn't have to stay there kind of mentality.
Mm,
And so when you're writing this, you have to kind of consider he's walking in and then it's going to walk out and leave these communities as well. And what are the
mhm,
ramifications of that? So now
mhm,
you have to decide what type of characters you're going to have in, surrounding him. So let's go ahead and talk about Geneva. She starts off the book, and I want to know why you decided to have us at the cemetery, because one,
mhm,
cemeteries are very precious to families, at least in my family. We would drive by random cemeteries and take care of graves sometimes, like
mhm.
what is it about it that you wanted to start there for us?
Well, what's funny is I actually had a version of the book when I was just trying to find my way in that started with Randy inside of a sheriff station getting her husband's effects. And I wrote this whole opening. And then I thought, no, I thought this series is about East Texas and it is about my love of East Texas. And part of that love is the pastoral and it's the beauty of the outdoors. I was like, this series has to start outside. We just have to be outside. And because Gen- two things. One, the name Geneva comes from because my mom will tell you there was a lady named Geneva in Lufkin, Texas, who had a little cafe. And my mom used to go there and get like a hot dog or she's going to die if I say that because she's vegan now, but she would get hot dogs and snow cones or whatever else. And her grandmother, my great grandmother, had a little cafe in Corrigan, Texas. So that's where the Geneva of it came. But the element of Geneva playing music for the dead and laying a blanket down. My grandmother, whose nickname was Precious, Precious used to lay down a blanket on her husband's grave because if he got cold. And that imagery just stayed with me for so long. And it's so specific. It feels so Southern to care for your dead, to treat a final resting place as kind of holy, that it just felt like a lovely place to start, especially a book that was going to very quickly bring in some ugly death. It felt nice to kind of introduce you both to the pine needles, to the feeling of being outside, but also to just that guy that sits out there that watches the place. Where's my fried pie? Like this is all like typical small town stuff. And I
Yeah.
just wanted you to feel that like right away. And I thought that that intro would really settle you into a space that feels specific because character, location is a character in the book and I really wanted to take you someplace. I'm a big fan of the novelist Jane Smiley, and I don't know if there are any burgeoning writers here, but she has a book called 13 Ways of Looking at the Novel that I consider to be like almost like a Bible for me. And I read it before I wrote my first book, and I revisit it a lot. But she talks about knowing what type of book you're writing and make sure that you're meeting your readers' expectations. And one of the types of books that this book is to me is like a travel log. It is meant to transport you to someplace different. And I just wanted to do that right away, both in terms of the outdoors, but also the little character interactions between an old lady and an old man at a cemetery in East Texas.
Oh, I love that you started outside because I did feel, I know you're sending some people to a new location. I felt like I was at home a lot of ways, but I'm so glad you started outside and not with an outsider, because if you would have started with
Mhm.
Randy, it would have been a non-Texan coming
I
into a
never
strange
even thought of that, but yes, it's
place.
sometimes your instincts. I say my unconscious is probably a better writer than I am. There are things that you just can't explain why you're doing it, but I hadn't thought of that, but you're right, it would have been a different book.
It would have been. And so, it would also kind of piqued your interest, like why are both her son and her husband dead and how, and so it starts moving pretty quickly. How do you do that? How do you keep it moving fast for the reader? Is that sort of an intent? Like, let me keep it happening, or do you have, is that in the Bible as well? Or is that just something that comes naturally for you?
No, and I'm glad you say it because I hear so many readers like, oh, well, it took me a while to get into it, but then I liked it. So I'm happy to hear that. It's all just rhythm. It's all and very instinctive, and it's very much like, we come from storytellers, and not just storytellers in terms of telling you a big story, but also like a joke. That's the other thing. My mom, when she has a joke to tell, she gets really into it and sets the scene and the whole thing. And so I come from people that really like know how to set the context and put you in the place and all of that. So I'm doing it really instinctively. And I always want my books to feel as if you came into my house or we're sitting on the front porch and we're shelling peas and I'm like, come here, let me tell you a story. And so it's just pure instinct. And it's a rhythm inside of me. I can kind of feel where, oh, something needs to happen. In that book by Jane Smiley, she does talk about this. She talks about it in a slightly different way, but I can just kind of feel, well, you gotta get something going. You just kind of have to get something going and to kind of hook people as soon as possible. And yeah.
One of your hooks was the music throughout. I know you mentioned to me that your mom was a big fan of blues and, just all these types of music that were sprinkled throughout. So this was part of your upbringing, but why did you want to bring it specifically into the storyline?
I probably to some degree have music in all of my books, but this one goes above and beyond. Part of it is the character of Joe. Part of it is just that he was a musician. So, then you put the jukebox in there. I just really wanted to, I love the blues. I love both blues and have come late in life back to an early love of country. And when I say that, I mean when I was growing up, when I would go spend my summers in Lufkin with my grandmother had one of those intercom systems in the house. That house wasn't, I don't think that house was 1,400 square feet, but it had two intercoms in it. Yes, we thought that was the fanciest thing ever, and it had a radio. And in Lufkin, Texas, what do you listen to on the radio? It's either
Country.
gospel or country. And
Yeah.
so I grew up kind of with, the old school stuff, like the Johnny Cash and I'm
Willie Nelson and
George from Tammy and George. Why am I thinking for
Wynette, Tammy Wynette and George
Tammy
Jones.
Wynette and George, what's his last name?
George
Jones.
Jones.
Lord help. And Charlie Pearl. I grew up with all that. And so, and then also, and you wouldn't hear as much blues on the radio. That was stuff we were just playing ourselves. But I think of blues and country as fraternal twins. They're the same. The music industry is what separated them.
Mhm.
So that's what I would listen to get into the space to write it. And it just kind of found its way into the world. And it was another sensory way of taking you someplace.
Mhm.
And then that's also then how the title came about, which ended up being not a surprise, but I don't remember what I first called. I think I tried to call the novel 59. And my publisher was like, we don't really love doing numbers for titles. So we all sat around trying to come up with titles. And I had Bluebird as an early idea of a title. I was like, no one's going to go for that. That's weird. A comma in the title, that's weird. And I just hid it inside of a list that I sent the publisher, and a couple people went, whoa, that's it. Because it just felt evocative. It just was its own kind of strange thing. And
Mhm.
that came from that John Lee Hooker song that's playing when Randy first sees the guitar.
Yes. So this is, I'm sure you've seen the video. Have you seen the video of Ann Patchett talking about this book?
Yes, I have.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. If y'all haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. But she said she doesn't read mystery thrillers. Like she has a mind for plot, and so they don't appeal to her. But when she saw this title, she couldn't help but pick it up and say, "Why didn't I have this title on a book? Like, I want this." So it is very evocative. But you also not only use this title, use lyrics throughout to, I think, start to tell part of the story, part of the dialogue. So how did you go about deciding? Because there's so many great songs out there to choose. Are these some of your favorites, or are these just some that you looked and thought, oh, this fits?
So every book that I write, I make a playlist
Okay.
just for that book. So for this book series, there are 3 different playlists, and they sound slightly different. And this playlist was heavy on Lightnin' Hopkins, John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters. So The whole time I'm writing, these things are playing on a loop, playing on a loop. And the reason I write with music for two reasons. The one, it is a heart opener for me. Like it just is the quickest way for me to get to my feelings. The other thing is it becomes kind of Pavlovian, that if you constantly play it when you're writing, once you turn the music on, you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm kind of ready to write. It is so effective for me that the playlist I had during the cutting season had some Adele on it. And at some point during dinner one night, my husband played Adele, and I was like, "My God, turn that off!" Because it was like I don't want to work right now. I don't want to work. Like it gets so connected in my brain. So sometimes the lyrics, they would just pop out as I'm writing because I've been listening to them in the background on a loop. And then other times I would sometimes like collect a Word doc full of Lightning Hopkins lyrics, and they would just kind of come, but it came very, very, very naturally.
I loved it. I think it adds such a different layer, a different level. And it, like you said, it's just one more sensory option that we have to tap into. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. I also am just so pumped that we get to hear. Oh, first of all, I'm gonna start over. You have a playlist before I forget this. Is this shared on Spotify? Can we find these?
Let us find out. Now, I know the other ones are, but I can't remember if Bluebird is on there.
If not, you may have to.
Yeah, I may have to fix that.
Yeah.
I know Heaven My Home is on there.
Okay.
It should be. It's so funny. I just pulled up Spotify. What was the last thing I was listening to?
Yeah. What is it?
Patsy Cline. I had to do the dishes. Unfortunately, we had a death in the family. So I just traveled home to Houston. And right before I left, we had a ton of dishes. And I was like, I'm just going to put on Patsy Cline and do the dishes. And it greatly helped.
You walking after midnight.
It was 7 Lonely Days was the last one I was listening to. I love her.
I do too. Her voice just does something.
Is on. Oh, well, no, let's see. That's the audiobook. Well, I'm gonna have to fix this because I see the audiobook, but I
Yeah.
don't actually see a playlist.
All right.
I'm gonna have to get
I'll
on
remind
that.
you if I don't see it in a bit. And
Yeah,
I'll
I'm gonna have
have
to
your
get on
mom
that.
remind
Yeah.
you too. And I bet she can come up with a pretty good playlist for you as well for some of these books. So okay. Let's keep talking about the the concept of love and hate really is a main pull and push theme throughout this because for so long he thinks that the trigger is that there's this hate of race, and then again he comes back around and says, well, is it really hate that did it, or is it love? And so I want you to talk about that a little bit and why you wanted us to tap into that as one of the major themes.
Yes, I am a firm believer that uh, love is the most elemental human experience. And I think it is more natural than hate. And I have a viewpoint that some, not all, but a lot of hate is inverted love. And what I mean by that is, first of all, let's take Wally, for example. I'm a firm believer that every villain has a wound. And boy, I'm about to say something now. Even old Trumpy, I don't know if you read his niece's book, Mary Trump's book. That young man got his ass kicked by his dad. There's a wound in there somewhere. Now, might he also be mentally imbalanced? Yes. May he also just be all these other things? But if you really look at how he came into the world, he came into the world at a deficit because his father was cruel, and his father was cruel to him. So we'll never know what he could have been in another way. Now, Wally is somebody who, is a different kind of villain. He's certainly not, like uh, a war criminal or anything like that. But um, what Wally's wound is I want and I didn't get.
Mhm.
I either wanted Geneva and my dad got her. I want that land and I didn't get the land I want. And somehow that gets twisted into a kind of ugly behavior that mimics hate. I also believe, for better or for worse, and I might get some emails about this, but I actually firmly believe that part of what confounds a certain segment of white people is there is something that's been told and taught, which is this story of the great men of history and great white men of history that built a nation and that did all of these things. Okay, but if you look a little bit closer, you begin to realize that's not so, that other people's bodies did the hard labor. And there's almost an almost infantilizing of white folks not being able to take care of their own kids or take care of themselves because other people were doing it for them. And once your unconscious gets a glimpse that, wait, we're not as great as they've all been telling us, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all. And I think that in addition to hate being an inversion of love, there's envy as well. That if I'm a white person being told, and any but white person here can tell me to shut the hell up because I'm not white, and I might be wrong
Keep
about all
going.
that.
Keep going.
This is just my read on it. That if I've been told that I have white privilege, but I'm struggling, and I don't understand why I'm struggling. I don't have a better sense of how the system is not set up to care for us. Your government is failing you in a lot of ways. It becomes very easy to blame an immigrant, to blame somebody else. And if you tell me I'm privileged, but I'm struggling to make my rent, I'm struggling to feed my family, I feel hostile and angry that you're saying I have a leg up. And then I see Black people or I see other people of color that are doing better than me. Or I see that Black folks came out of 400 years of slavery and invented jazz. Oh shit, they still here and they still doing okay? Oh, I'm having some feelings about that. I'm having some feelings about the fact that I've been told that I'm the great one. And yet there's this other group of people, there are many other groups of people that have had a boot on their neck for a millennium and are actually surpassing in some ways whiteness. And it's so threatening that I think it just turns around and undoes it and inverts in on itself and turns into a kind of ugly hate.
Well,
Weird theory, but it is the theory that I have.
I don't know that it's so weird, but you did mention at the beginning of this that one of your purposes is to write Black fiction, write stories about the Black community. And what we know is that that portion wasn't in our history books. I mean, how do we find out history? It's who writes it in their perspective, right? So I think a lot of that, it's so hard for us to even know what happened, what was going on back then, and who really was doing the work, right? Like, just like you said, it's the white man controlled the pen.
Yeah. And I feel there are so many ways in which where we are right now as a country in terms of cuts to education, in terms of I had civics. Remember civics classes? Remember we had to learn how stuff worked?
Yep.
So there are so many people walking around, and this is of every color, of every race, gender, whatever. There are so many people walking around with the misunderstanding of what ails them. It's easy to blame a lot of things without looking at, wait, why aren't we getting more money for education? Wait, why are we struggling to pay our medical bills? What? That doesn't sound right. They're just, it is my opinion that there are many ways in which our government fails us. And if you don't completely know why, it's very easy to fall prey to a blame game.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, and I talk about this sometimes about crime fiction. So we've been talking about race, but if we expand that out to talking about crime fiction, one of the reasons why I find writing about crime fiction fascinating, and I did just read a book about women and crime and why we are interested in crime. And I think there's an obviousness around us being the more vulnerable people in our bodies of wanting to read these stories that kind of scare us so we can also figure out how can we get out of this situation. But beyond the prurience of crime to me is about the illusion of scarcity. Crime is about a belief that there's not enough. There's not enough land for everybody. There's not enough food for everybody. There's not enough love for everybody. So I'm going to get mine. And if I got to knock you down and do it, I'm going to get mine. There are a lot of people walking around like that. And the truth of the matter is there actually is enough if we share.
Yeah.
And one of the things about people being mad about immigrants coming here taking something, you're mad because you don't have that much to begin with. because your government isn't taking. Of course, you're pissed off that somebody else is getting, can walk into the hospital and get treatment because you also are suffering to pay your medical bill. Like you're blaming the wrong person. The truth of the matter is there is enough here in this country for everybody. It requires a mindset of sharing. And I think that writing about these crime stories and writing about scarcity played out to the end, what it can lead to, and how it doesn't ever work out for anybody. It ends up being a way to poke at that what I consider to be a fallacy. I don't think that there's not enough. I think there is enough. And I just try to write from a place like that. I'm always trying to write from a place of psychology rather than ideology. I'm trying to write from a place of what's going on in people's hearts. I will not, this is not a spoiler because it's on the back of the book, but the second book, Heaven My Home, a boy goes missing, a young white kid who is the child of a captain in the Aryan Brotherhood. And Darren has to find this kid and has to see that beyond everything, there is a child here who didn't ask for any of this.
Right.
And even some of the people around him, how they found their way into the Aryan Brotherhood is not necessarily pure hate. Some of it's cynicism, some of it's cosplay, but some of it is there's a wound in there somewhere. There's a misunderstanding, and there's this kind of anger that why don't I have more? Why isn't the American dream working for me? And it can't be my fault, and it can't be white people's fault because y'all been telling me the whole time the white people are fantastic. They did all this. So it's got to be somebody else that's coming here that's messing it up, which is not the truth at all.
Have you been able, because now that you've finished these 3 books, have you been able to put them to the side? Like, is it truly a trilogy, or do you think, because there could be more crimes on Highway 59, I'm just saying, like, I know this happens up. I mean, a
couple of things. One, there's something I'm thinking about, but it's not necessarily with Darren, but there's no way I will not be writing about Texas. And there's no way I won't always come back to rural stuff. I just like writing about it. But the other thing is that we are right now trying to adapt this into a series. It sold to Peacock. We are just starting that process. And of course, there's no guarantee of anything. And Hollywood is in a very weird place right now. It's in a place of retraction, and people aren't making as many shows, but there's a great deal of excitement about this. So now I'm getting to know him in a different way, that he'll be like literally made flesh and blood, walking across a screen. So that's part of I wanted to close the trilogy for several reasons. But one of them was that I knew that this was coming, and I want what I wrote in books to just live. And then that's always there. Nothing we do with the television show will undo what is written. And I wanted to be able to find this man in this different way. And
so are you writing it? Are you writing the screenplay?
Yes, yeah. I'm writing with my sister. So what's so fun is that my sister and I wrote together an adaptation of her book, and now we're doing an adaptation of my book. So we're doing it together.
Working with your sister doing that.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot. We laugh our booties off. We laugh so much. This is a really hard job. There's so many decisions, there's so much compromise, there's so many meetings, there's so much strategizing, and it's really nice to do it with somebody who makes you laugh.
Yeah.
Whom you trust implicitly, with whom you have a shared value system, with whom you have a shorthand. We could just look at each other across a room. And we've been on Zoom meetings and know that we're going to say yes to something by just looking at each other.
Yeah.
And so it's just a wonderful thing to have. I don't know. The work is too hard to not make it fun in some kind of way. And she also is, how do I put this, more, I don't know if I'm like the mean one, but like I'm the more, my mom can pick what she wants to say about it, but I'm more caustic. And Tembi is not necessarily sweeter, but she's the one that keeps the heartbeat going. She makes sure that I'll get deep into plot and all this kind of stuff. And she'll be like, wait a second, come back here to the heart. Let's come back to this character's kind of heart. And so that's a good balance for us.
I love that yin yang. Erica has a question. Was it your writing that took you to LA?
It was the dream of being in Hollywood. So before I was a novelist, I was a movie writer I wanted to be a movie director. So I went to Northwestern for college. I was a film student and I moved right to LA for two reasons. One, three. My sister lived here and she's an actor, now producer and writer as well. I wanted to be in the business, and then my boyfriend, who's now my husband, was living in LA. So I was like, I can't live in Manhattan. So if you want to work in Hollywood or in the movie business, it would be LA or for writing, it would be LA or New York. I mean, now for production, it might be Atlanta, it might be, New Orleans, Chicago, but for writing, it's pretty much New York or LA. My body is not meant to ever live in Manhattan. Like it is not, I'm not cut out for it. Whereas LA, I can see the sky and, it's like Houston, frankly, in a lot of ways, Houston and LA are quite similar.
Erica wants to know if you have any dream casting for this. I mean, you've been living in, with these characters writing it. What will you say?
The biggest one is honestly not Darren. The
Okay.
biggest piece of dream casting would be Jeffrey Wright to play the twin uncles.
Okay.
Yeah, look him up, Jeffrey Wright. He was in Westworld. He was in American Fiction that just came out. We've talked about a couple of people, which I don't want to talk too much about because now that it's like in process, we'll see. But I've always felt like Jeffrey Wright playing those twin uncles that have just wildly different points of view would be really interesting. And my mom's mom is the person who taught me how to read. My grandmother was a teacher, was an educator. She taught me to read when I was like 4.
Oh,
So we owe the book to my grandmother as well.
absolutely. Is that Precious?
No, my grandmother, Miss Johnson.
Miss Johnson. Y'all get your questions ready if you have questions that I haven't gotten to or that you want to ask. But while they are doing that, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right. Give me your favorite country artist or song.
Chris Stapleton.
When driving, windows up or windows down?
Down.
Whataburger or In-N-Out?
Oh my God, Whataburger.
Favorite home cooked meal? I was so hungry during this entire book.
Probably it's not very Texas, but pesto pasta.
Okay. I would never have guessed that. California or Texas?
For which reason?
You tell us.
Oh, it breaks my heart to say it, but I would say California.
And then any chance you can share Geneva's spice blend with us that you mentioned that she held back?
No, because I probably made that up. I probably don't even know what it is. No. No, but my grandmother used to make that. Mrs. Johnson used to make tea cakes and fried pies. And that, man, those peach fried pies would be everything.
I wish you need to put some of that on your website.
I'm sure it had nutmeg. I'm sure it had maybe allspice. I don't know.
I like how Lowry's kept coming up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm a big I still get my mom to ship me some spices from Texas that I can't get here. So, but yeah.
It's really fun to write about food. And sometimes I'll write about food that I've never actually eaten or heard. Like I'll make, like in the third book, I made up some things. I'm like, do people eat that? It sounds really good though.
Let's go ahead and go. Erica has a question and I'm going to get her to ask. Go ahead, Erica.
Attica, first of all, I want to thank you for the conversation. This has been the fastest hour, I think, that I've had in a long time. So thank you. My question is, as you're writing the book, when do you know the ending? Like, do you go into the book knowing kind of what's going to happen, or does it happen like just as you're developing the story?
It's a weird kind of combo. And with this book in particular, I kind of knew the end. I knew the thing with the mom thing surprised me, but I knew that he helped Mac. I knew that he helped him. I just had to figure out how to make it show up. In terms of the actual crime in Lark, I did know that what that was because Quiet as It's Kept, this book is actually there was a version of it that was a script 20 plus years ago when I went to Sundance to be a director. There was no Darren in it, but some of the other characters were in it. So this plot I actually kind of knew. A lot of times I'm just finding it as I go. My first 3 books, I didn't know the end. That's why they're so long, because I had no idea who did it. I just kept typing until I figured it out. But I wanted the books in this series to be tighter. So I would challenge myself to know the ending much more soon in the process than I would have otherwise. But I don't have it all mapped out. I just kind of know I'm kind of going over there, but I don't have it all mapped out to start.
Great
I
question.
want writing to feel like reading, so I want to be surprised too.
Great one. All right, thank you, Erica. Does anybody else have a question? I know, let's see, somebody has something in the chat. Yes, a recording is going to be available. Somebody asked me this, so if you did miss a portion of this, you'll be able to see it later. I do want to talk about, did you have a say in the narrator for this book? Have you listened to it?
No. I tried one time to listen to one of my books and I went, this is weird. Nope. I don't want to listen to it. But I've met JD Jackson. He is delightful. He is a delightful human being. Boy, does his voice sound like melted butter. Like, he's fantastic. So I hear from people all the time how incredible the audiobooks of all 3 of them are, but I've really not deeply taken it in because it's my voice. Like, I should be hearing my voice. So when I hear somebody else's voice, I get really uncomfortable.
And he does have a great voice. The only thing I will say as a
He probably mispronounced some stuff, I've heard.
Oh, it's quite funny. He says Brookshire Brothers.
No. And I wish I had known. Okay.
I know you'd crack up. I know your mom would crack up too. And anybody else in Texas, it's Brookshire Brothers. So But the other thing, I just think you captured Texas so well. For instance, I don't think anybody else knows FM Road. Like, that's something we all grew up, the farm to market road, but that's such a Texas thing that it's just quintessential. When you describe a size of a building, guess what? It's how big by the football field, right? Because everybody knows how big a football field is in Texas. So I just appreciated all those little bits that you dropped in that maybe an outsider might not know about, but someone from Texas is like, thank you. You see me, you see the land, so I appreciated all that. All right. Looks like we have another, somebody's talking about a bourbon cocktail. Bourbon did come up quite a bit in that. All right. Someone
Well, can I tell you what is really good?
Yes.
Even though I'm getting older now and I really can't drink anymore. I can't sleep when I drink. But you know what's really good is Bullet Bourbon and Dr. Pepper.
Well, you mentioned Dr. Pepper like chasing something in the drink in Geneva.
Yeah, but I'm gonna tell you what, Bullet Bourbon and Dr. Pepper, do yourself a favor.
Okay. Really. All right. You heard it straight from Attica. Her mom's cracking up laughing. All right. What other questions do y'all have for Attica? Anybody else want to ask something? If not, I'm just going to keep asking because y'all know I've got a lot of questions. All right. I want to talk about this cashmere coat because I feel like it had so much symbolism. This outsider coming in this pristine white cashmere coat. And by the end, all of East Texas is all over that. And, for me, it was just such a symbol throughout because it's such a pristine color, and then that red all over it. So was that intentional?
Yes. Anything to mark her at first sight as, girl, you don't really know where you are. If you know anything about East Texas, you're not going to be walking around in cashmere, and certainly not in rural East Texas in a white coat, because yes, you will get red dirt kind of all over it. But it was just a visual way for something to starkly set her apart from everybody else.
Well, and the fact that she doesn't really understand her surroundings either, like the fact that she feels like she can go up and, just start screaming at these men who she has no idea who they are, or, that they have guns on them, I'm thinking, stop, just like Darren is. He's just terrified for her because she has no clue what she's up against. None.
Yeah. All
right. Let's see. There was one other question. I loved also that this probable cause discussion, a walking probable cause. Because it's such a thing, I think, that if you don't really think about as a white person, you don't understand this, because I don't worry about my son, being in a black hoodie on the street. It just doesn't cross my mind that that could be an issue, right? But this was, I mean, it is a main concern. So I just wanted to, I think this will probably be our last question, but why did you want to tackle that one as well?
Well, it came out kind of naturally, and it's interesting because I've had really raging debates with other Black people about this issue, about whether or not you change who you are in order to not be harassed. Or if in the face of all this, you just wear whatever you need to wear it because why? You're not doing anything wrong. I am somebody who, this is just my personality. I want to be alive more than I want to be wearing whatever. So I'm very much like, I'm going to, I'm one of those people after 9/11, give me a flag, like, give me, I want to be safe, so I'm like that. And so I would never invite, I would never dress in a way to invite. Of course, I hear my daughter's voice in my head because my daughter would be like, "You're not inviting anything. It's their fault." Like I hear my daughter who's very righteous about it, and she certainly is like that about gender. She gets very, very, very angry when anybody suggests that what a woman is wearing is in any way inviting harassment. So it's just an interesting debate about, and I think because I come from relatively, when I'm using the word conservative, not in terms of political conservative, but I come from a middle class kind of Black Texas experience where for the most part that's kind of how I was taught. I was taught go into a grocery store and don't touch anything. Don't eat anything you bought at the store till it's been home and it's a week later. Like you don't get gum and eat it walking out. You can have that next Tuesday. Like there's just always this sense of you could get in trouble. And so I have lived my life kind of always making sure that I don't do anything that invites trouble. And yet, that is not freedom. And so it's kind of, it's kind of interesting. And I hear the other side of the argument when people say that's not right. You should be able to wear whatever you want to wear and be who you are and not be harassed. So I think it was just a natural thing when you're thinking about those two uncles that have such wildly different ideas about how we should comport ourselves as Black people. What is the safest way to go about it? And of course, they're also talking about the law itself. It was a way to kind of, because I think I live between those poles. I think part of how I could write Darren as a cop was that if I knew that he lived between two men who thought differently about things, because I'm like that. There are times when I'm like, not this year, but there are times when I'm like, oh my God, I love America. This country, look at America getting her little stuff together. She's trying to, I get excited sometimes. And other times I'm like, God, fuck this place. The hell is wrong with these people? And I think, and maybe a lot of people do, I live between these two poles. And so I think that particular thing was just an example of how I am sometimes split between what I want to do to feel safe and what is actually my God-given right to do. And you're just on a daily basis trying to figure out that is what it is to be Black a lot of times. I remember, even this will be a funny thing, when my husband and I had to go buy some kind of an appliance and we went to an appliance store. I was like, what is the right amount of jewelry that says take me seriously, but I don't want to be charged too much for this refrigerator? Like I need to wear some kind of jewelry so I look super like to take me seriously as a Black woman, but then it can't be too much jewelry because then I don't want to get charged too much for this refrigerator. You're just constantly doing this math like all the time. And my husband is white. So we have a lot of teeing about, come on, sir, use your whiteness for good. Come help us navigate this situation. So we have a sense of humor about it. We all the time talk about reparations begin at home. And I have a glass of water.
I think that I mean, I love that you're having a conversation about all these topics though, right? Not just in your home, but with friends in your community. And I feel like this book and this series is perfect for book clubs because it does raise all these issues and it makes these conversations start and you really start to think about it in your own life. And, Randy doesn't have to consider any of those situations because of where she lives. And but you've lived in the deep South where it is an issue, right? You do have to make those considerations which is wrong. We shouldn't have to, but.
And you know what? It goes the other way too. I'm gonna say it. It goes the other way too, and I've been wrong. So the second book takes place on Caddo Lake near the Louisiana border. So I went to stay on Caddo Lake with my dad because I was too scared to. If you just Google Caddo Lake, I was not gonna go stay in a cabin there by myself. It's very creepy. The Spanish moss. It's this huge lake. So Dad and I go stay there. I go through life and I see somebody in coveralls or overalls. Some dude had some missing teeth. You know, we stayed in a Airbnb where you had to go pay in cash at a tackle shop. And we go pay the guy and the missing teeth. And I'm like, no. And my dad's approach is very much like, how you doing, man? I like your boots. And whatever he gets back tells him what's going on. That guy was the nicest guy.
Yeah.
When I was in Caddo Lake, my last day there, I went to go eat at a cafe. Somebody knew I was a writer, that I was in town. They paid my bill when I went to go eat there. So it goes the other way too, that like, we've got to really, really kind of give you can't just assume anything. That's what I'm trying. You can't assume anything. You don't know anything. And you kind of have to test the waters and see what you get back. And then that tells you the kind of human being that you're dealing with. Because some people will look like, excuse my language, a cracker that says, I don't want to get anywhere near them. And they might be delightful. Or they may be, as those boys in Charlottesville, walking around in khakis and want to kill you.
Right.
You really have to kind of test out waters and not judge people by what they appear to be.
Well,
and that goes all kind of ways.
It does. I mean, Texas did earn its, motto, we are the friendly state, for a reason. And so I try to remember that. And we'll talk my kids are like, why are you talking to strangers, Mom? I'm like, because that's how I grew up. You say hi to everybody, you wave in the car, keep those doors open for people. But I will hang on to my Texas roots forever. And I appreciate that you continue to write about it. And I just want to thank you so much, Attica, for being here tonight. It's been wonderful. I'm so glad that you invited your mom. She's such a delight as well. And readers out there, thank y'all so much for joining and staying with me through all these interviews. Please make sure you check out her Instagram for latest news. She has a website. I'm sure we'll all be waiting for news, hopefully coming out through this Peacock series that's coming. So hopefully, fingers crossed. Everybody, if you can also check out the LB's Lover Books. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and of course on YouTube. So please consider subscribing and liking any of the videos. Next week, we're going to be discussing Linda Cohen Loigman's novel, The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern. This is a historical fiction. Shelby Van Pelt says it's a sparkling ode to second chances. This book will dazzle you. This is my writing part. This book is going to dazzle you with first loves doused with some magical realism. So I hope y'all have a chance to read that one. And then coming up in March, you're going to hear from Australian author Emma Gray for her sophomore novel. And then that's called The Picture of You. And then the next one is Elizabeth Delosier for her debut, Eleanor of Avignon. So hopefully y'all can have a chance to read all of those. But if you know of an author who you'd like to chat with, just let me know. That's how Attica came up. Like Valencia, we were talking, we're like, we've got to get Attica. Like, we just have to get Attica. So we appreciate you jumping on tonight to discuss all this with us. Also, if you are thinking about what books you want to read, what authors, like I said, contact me. Hopefully I can make a connection. No promises, but we'll try. But Attica, I'm going to say this. Thank you so much for taking me home to my part of Texas, for having me smell the pines, remind me what Texas fall feels like, how I can go from sticky to cool in 2 seconds. But even more importantly, thank you for walking into the unknown. For us readers, for carrying us through with your beautiful words, your haunting words. Thank you so much from all of us. And we just appreciate it. And we can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. Oh my God. What a nice evening with you guys. Thank you.
Well, thank y'all, everybody. Y'all have a wonderful night. And I will see y'all in 1 week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.